So welcome everyone. Today's, this session rather, is titled Communities Building Safe and Inclusive Learning and Service Environments for LGBTQ+, Two-Spirit and Gender Diverse Youth. Very happy to welcome our guest speakers today, Harper Kushner. Harper is pursuing a bachelor's degree in political science and communication studies and a minor in American history at the University of Montana. He has been part of Empower Montana since 2010, when he helped establish Youth Forward to support queer youth in Missoula, Montana, and its surrounding areas. Now, Harper facilitates Empower Montana's queer youth programs and is the co-representative for Montana State QSA Network. Our second presenter is Sierra Pannell, who got involved with Empower Montana when receiving her bachelor's degree in social work and minor in African American studies from the University of Montana. Sierra currently facilitates Empower Montana's BIPOC youth program, the Association of BIPOC Youth, ABY, and is the co-representative for Montana QSA Network. You can read both more about both Harper and Sierra on our website. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So glad you all could make it to our session today. I'm excited for all of the good conversation we're going to have. Harper, if you want to take it away.
Absolutely. Well, as Sierra already said, welcome. We are so excited to be here. It is an absolute beautiful day out, so that is something that's already bringing me so much joy today. So thank you so much for having us here. We really appreciate it. My name is Harper Kushner. I go by he, him, his pronouns. I feel like I shouldn't introduce myself again. I feel like Paul did a really good job. So I will pass to Sierra.
Thanks, Harper. We're going to go ahead and do our mission and all of that good stuff. So you could, thanks, Lonnie. So Empower Montana's mission is just to create a more just and inclusive society by developing youth and adult leaders who work to end mistreatment, correct systematic inequalities, and strengthen communities across Montana. So that's kind of just our main goal and what we do. For who we serve, we kind of have three main branches. So we work in youth and schools. So we do after school programs with youth, and we also do provide trainings for students and educators and administrators throughout Montana. We work in businesses and organizations. We work in just a ton of different organizations throughout Montana and really just helping them work on bias reduction, anti-racism trainings and all of that. And then we also work in our community. And so we have two major community events, being the Missoula MLK Day Community Celebration. And we also do a youth-led rally with that. And then we also have Diversity Day, which celebrates youth leadership and also the passing of the non-discrimination ordinance in Montana or in Missoula. So those are our community events. And that's kind of just what we do as a whole. And then specifically for today, we have some visioning and agreements. We really like participatory workshops and trainings. And so we ask you all to participate at your own comfort level, but also, to step outside of your comfort level or your little box that you're in, however you see fit. So whether that's speaking out or using the chat box, whatever you feel comfortable with. And then we also just ask for you all to suspend judgment and really just lean into curiosity and to really think about why you're thinking about things or why you react to something that's said, just to make it more meaningful way to interact with each other. And then we should have some, I think next is goals. Yes. Okay. So we have some goals just to kind of really lead you all into this time and kind of structure your time together. And so our first goal is just to learn skills in identifying our cultural lenses, values, and experiences in understanding LGBTQ plus Two-Spirit and gender diverse youth experiences. The next one is to build a shared language and foundation of understanding around oppression and its impact on LGBTQ plus and gender diverse youth. And then that last one is just to identify actions necessary to improve multi-tiered systems of support to LGBTQ plus Two-Spirit and gender diverse youth. So hopefully in our time together, we can accomplish those goals. And then just a couple of agreements. Confidentiality is our biggest one. And so in this space together, we're here and we're just making sure that we just share for ourselves and not anybody else's experiences. And so when we come out of this space, we also want to make sure that we are sharing maybe those ideas or those stories, but not the names or identifiers of the people who told those. And also, if you know somebody in this session and you see them later and you want to kind of talk about what they had said earlier, we just ask that you ask permission to restart that conversation. And then our other agreement is just to listen with respect. You might hear things that you might not agree with or you don't understand, and that's totally okay. But we just ask that, again, you be more curious about it. Yeah, those are our agreements, and I hope we all can follow those. And yeah. I think next we're going to move into our first activity, which is one of my favorites, and I'm going to turn it over to Harper to go over that.
Thanks, Sierra. So as Sierra said, this is frame of reference. We're going to be learning some skills in identifying the cultural lenses that impact our leadership and also understanding the lenses of others as well. So none of us are neutral or objective, even though we all strive to be. We see the world through the lenses the lenses of our life and experiences, as well as our social identity groups. So including all of those, as well as on the screen, we want to create our frame of reference through which we experience, understand, and participate in the world. So the first step to effective cross-cultural communication and understanding our own frame of reference, it's not as easy as we think because we take for granted our own cultural context. So for this specific activity, we're going to have you engage in some self-reflection and answer a few questions, which are actually on the screen as well. So what are some of your most significant lenses? What is a lens that might bring you confidence as a service provider working with LGBTQ youth? And what is a lens that might be challenging or a barrier when working with LGBTQ youth? So we're going to open up a breakout room and just discuss with your group these questions, and then we will all bring you back and we'd like to hear from you all.
Before that, thank you, Harper. I just love to model before we kind of break out, just so you all have kind of a greater sense of what we're asking you all to do. So I can definitely model this frame of reference because I've done it a million times. So I think some of my biggest significant lenses are definitely my race and ethnicity. I think my age is a really big one, and also just the place and location in which I live. I think those are things that I'm always thinking about and are always in the front of my mind. Some lenses that might bring me confidence as a service provider for LGBTQ plus youth. I think I'd also just say my age. I think that when working with youth, I might seem like more, I don't know, just I feel like I can understand more of where they're at, maybe not in their sexual orientation or their gender identity, but with just, their age and how they are growing up in the world, being in a similar time. And I think a lens that creates a challenge or barrier for me is just my sexual orientation, in that I do not identify as LGBTQ plus. And so that is difficult. That is obviously a barrier in trying to connect. And I can definitely have compassion, but that empathy and being able to really understand what these youth are going through is a little bit more difficult for me. That was just an example and just some modeling so that you all can kind of understand more what we're asking you all to do. Yeah, so if you just all want to think about that, and I'm not sure if we have the option to do breakout rooms. Do you see it on your side, Harper?
I do not.
Okay, that's okay.
We can do breakout rooms if you'd like. Do you know how many sessions or how many groups you want to do?
However many, it doesn't matter.
So groups of 4 or 5?
Yeah, 4 or 5 is great.
Okay.
Thank you.
And that'll be automatic assignment. And do you have an idea of how long the session's going to be?
We can give about, let's do 7 minutes for discussion. And I can post those questions in the chat for you all to reference as well.
All right. Sarah, I think Harper went into one of the sessions as well. Would you like to go into a session?
Yeah, sorry, I definitely saw that. And then I said not now because I was posting the questions. But yeah, if you want to put me in one, that's fine.
Yeah. Do you have a preference to where you want to be? Okay, we'll put you in. I think they're all pretty balanced in groups of 3. So I'm going to throw one off and put you in room 1.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Danny, for doing that on the fly.
Yeah, I think Deb jumped in there as well.
Oh, good. Okay, great.
But she's by herself, which is funny. Do you want her?
You might want to move her to a room that has some more folks.
Yeah. Okay.
And Kim's just joining us now. I just admitted Kim.
Okay. So we'll put Kim in room 2. Paul, I'm setting up the video for the next session. Do you want to be the person that transfers over there in 10 minutes and you're ready to go, or will it be Deb?
No, it'll be me, and I'll be happy to do that. And then maybe I'll come back to this room.
Once you're done, or
once I'm done kind of introducing and introducing the film.
Okay, so I'll just kind of have it in the background.
Yeah, is that okay? It'll just run, right?
Yeah, it should just run. Yeah, I'm not gonna interact much with it either.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I'll meet you in that other room in just a minute.
We don't need to record that session, do we?
I don't think we do, no. Well, we can probably just post a link to it, but do you want to assign these? Yeah, and I don't know if Lori is not assigned to a room either, but
Hi, Paul. No, I don't need to be a part of anything. I'm just here to watch
Okay.
Sarah and Harper. I'm their supervisor, and just so they're here to
oh, got it.
help them.
Sure. How about Lori? Lori Michaels? Not sure if Lori wants to join a room.
I'm okay right now. I'm
You bet. No problem.
auditing. How's that? But I'm not listening to what you're saying. I'm trying
Not
to
a-
do my regular work stuff and something popped up and I'm like, oh no, that's due today. So I'm listening attentively when there's stuff, but I didn't figure I would be a very good breakout room joiner at the moment. So
I know the feeling. We're happy to have you. Thanks, Lori.
thank you. I'm learning a lot. This is very educational. I really appreciate it.
We appreciate you being here. And Nat, thank you for your help with admitting folks.
Should we give a 2-minute warning?
Will do.
Thank you, Danny.
So I think that's about the 7-minute limit. Should I start bringing them back in?
I think that's great.
All right, closing them.
All right, it looks like everybody's coming back. All right, so let's just spend a little time, debriefing in front of the bigger group if you feel like sharing. So I guess we'll start with, did you realize anything about yourself through this activity? And feel free to, I guess, share. I was thinking, like, should we raise a hand, do a thumbs up? I'm confused with how that
If
works.
you're just feeling called, you go ahead and speak out. Yeah, with any learnings or something you learned about other people or just something that you really like that somebody shared.
I have something to share. I was thinking all of us that serve primarily this marginalized community are probably not, that do not represent from the community. So maybe we all should do a better job of recruiting staff, faculty, volunteers to work with the youth from the community also.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that is super important as well. Anybody else with anything that really just amazed them in their breakout session? Don't everyone jump at once. It's getting a little rowdy in here for my liking.
I will just say that I really like getting to meet people in the breakout sessions and hearing their stories. And it just seems like it gives you such a different, you're used to being yourself, right? And when you talk with other people, you learn their experiences and you learn things from them. So I found that really valuable.
Yeah, I totally agree. Thank you. Brady in the chat said, other people can be confident in a lens I may worry is a barrier. Yeah, I think that is so interesting because I love frame of reference because it's always an activity for me where I really realize, like, yes, I'm a complex person, but other people are too. Sometimes I forget to be like, oh, like other people have a lot going on as well. And so it's so interesting to hear other people's lenses and where they think they have challenges or barriers, and myself being like, oh, like I've never thought of it that way. So I just love this activity. Okay. Oh, people are popping off in the chat. I love the chat function. Okay, yours said, one thing that I heard from our breakout group on one of the barriers is our age difference when it comes to connecting through the lens of a youth right now compared to what we experienced. Yeah, that is very interesting, and I think something that I've heard other people speak truth to. So thank you for sharing. Lori in the chat said, I enjoy discussing with my group. We are from such different spaces, but share some challenges and strengths. Thank you for sharing. And then Jody said, I learned that everyone in a group loves their jobs. Yes, Jody, we did learn that everyone loves their jobs. And I think that just really speaks truth to if you don't like your job, you can find a job you do love. So yes, I learned that as well. Awesome. Would anybody else like to share any insights or anything they learned? All right, Erin said, everyone in our group were coincidentally coworkers that we already knew relatively well. That is awesome. Get some deeper connections. We love that. Well,
I'd like to just toss in one thing that I've done multiple times, this the social identity dimensions stuff, to just examine where we all fall and what is our dominant dimensions. And I've always found it interesting because while I am part of the LGBTQ IA community, that's not the lens that has most shifted the way that I walk in the world. The one that has, and it actually changes how I interact with youth the most, is disability. Because it means there's things I can't do or whatnot, and it's the one I've lived with the longest. I was diagnosed at 4, and I literally don't remember a time before it. So it's always interesting to me to do these and to look at the different identity dimensions, because yes, it's a barrier and a disadvantage, but it's not a new thing to me. It's just kind of there. And I don't necessarily realize how much I adapt everything I do with it until I sit down and think about it. Because when I tell the kids, I'm sorry, guys, my body just doesn't work that way today. Here's how I'm going to have to do something different than how you can. That's my normal. To them, it's an adult admitting something is different, which changes the interaction there, because suddenly a grown-up is saying, hey, my body doesn't work. Can we make something work differently? Which actually has opened some really great doors for conversation about difference. But yeah, it's one of those things that when I do these activities and examine it, it always kind of, it's eye-opening to me just to sit and think back, okay, on the last week or two, how does this impacted with things in the way that I walk in the world in ways that are different than other identity dimensions.
Yeah. Thanks, Anna. That was very important. Very well said. Something that I've learned kind of relating to that is just to, in spaces, ask whoever I'm with if their access needs are met or what needs to change in order that their access needs can be met. So thank you for bringing it back to my mind. Awesome. Well, we are going to move into our next activity called the cycle of oppression. And this is a piece of theory that just allows us to understand how different forms of mistreatment get perpetuated into a cycle that is very difficult to break. Before we get into the cycle, we do like to just do some definitions so that we're all on the same page and all have the same kind of working definitions of things. We like to start with prejudice. So prejudice being our internal perspective. So our beliefs, our values, our thoughts, our assumptions, those are all prejudice. And, prejudice doesn't always have to be bad. I really don't like, well, what don't I like? I don't like the color red that much for myself. So I'm prejudiced towards red. Whenever I see a red shirt in Target, I say no, thank you. And that's just my internal perspective. And we can't really live in a world without prejudice, right? Like we're always thinking new thoughts and we're always having values and beliefs. But going on to discrimination, that is our external behavior. So that is acting upon our prejudices. And, we can choose not to discriminate. We can choose not to act out or be violent or whatever it may be. But sometimes there are those unconscious behaviors like our tone or rolling our eyes or our facial expressions or our body posture that can symbolize, discrimination unconsciously. And then that next one, systematic oppression, we like to break those two down. So systematic just being ongoing, repetitive, pervasive, expected, predictable. And then oppression is just to hold down. And so when we put those two together, it's just continually holding down a group or an individual. So now that we all kind of are on the same page with that, we're going to go into our cycle. And we just like to start our cycle with, really stating that we don't believe that anybody is born to, be bad. We believe that we're all born good or innocent and curious. But as time goes on, we get misinformation. And so misinformation, it can be unintentional. So just like missing information or not having information. But it also can be intentional, right? Some people do put information out there knowing it's wrong. So we're, for the sake of our time together for the cycle, we are going to do LGBTQ plus youth specifically. And you can walk through the cycle any marginalized group of people. But I think it'd be most helpful today to do LGBTQ plus youth. So we're also going to be asking you all to make some really broad statements about this group or state some stereotypes. And that doesn't mean that you believe them or that we think they're right. But we just are naming them, knowing that they are out there and knowing that some people do believe them. And also just for the sake of to see how this cycle perpetuates. So where I guess my first question, and if you want to speak it out or put in the chat, is where do we get all of our information? Like all the information we know, where is it coming from?
Do you mean personally or as a whole? As you know, where is it coming from as a whole?
Like if you think about your life and you think about all of the information you know, how did you get that? So some people in the chat are saying like news or social media, YouTube, yes, personal experiences, parents, yeah, family is a really big one. Educators, friends, entertainment, coworkers, yeah. We get information from a lot of different people, all different times. Yeah, religious institutions, absolutely. And is all of that information like totally correct and good and great and perfect? No, yeah, heck no. Yeah, not all of that information is correct. So if we think about the different messages that are sent about LGBTQ plus youth, what are what's the misinformation we hear about this group of people? And again, feel free to put in the chat or speak it out. To get the ball rolling, I can go ahead and share one that I've definitely heard a lot, is just that they're just confused. They're very confused. They don't know what they're doing. This is just a phase, right? Yeah, it's a phase. What are some other ones? If anybody can think of some. Yeah, confused, traumatized for sure. Those are all, yeah, oh, they're really rolling in now. They want everyone to be like them. They're too young to know themselves, trying to get attention. Yeah, absolutely. And that is all information that we get about LGBTQ plus youth, right? And when people act on the basis of this misinformation, that's when mistreatment occurs. And so we see that's like being isolated or targeted or devalued. And we like to think of this one as like a person to person. So it's not that like big group of people discriminated against another group. It's more like one-on-one. So can anybody think of any mistreatment, what mistreatment looks like for LGBTQ plus youth? Exclusion, absolutely. Bullying, for sure. Anybody else? Yeah, definitely slurs, religious pressure, isolation from queer peers. To me, mistreatment is continue to treat them as you want them to be, not as they have identified. Absolutely. So just like, yeah, not respecting them, and not, maybe it can also look like not saying their correct pronouns or their correct name, you know, the name that they use. Outing people, absolutely. That is all mistreatment that is based on that misinformation. And so with some of those mistreatment, it can become normalized in society. And so, and you know, like our media or our churches or like our education system as a whole just accepts this misinformation and mistreatment and makes it into laws or policies to uphold it. And so this is kind of that the institutionalization is more of that bigger piece in that kind of like macro level. So what can anybody think of how LGBTQ plus youth, like that institutionalization of that mistreatment looks like for that group? I think someone put in like conversion attempts, like I think that's a really great one. on just how maybe like religious institutions try to institutionalize that mistreatment. Anti-trans medical access laws. Yeah, and thanks, Harper. And just anti-trans laws, legislation in general. I know here in Montana, we're seeing a lot of that. Anybody else think of anything? Aaron says it's just a difference of opinion. Yeah, I hear that a lot as well. Yeah, so we can start to see now when we have this misinformation and that leads to people being mistreated because of it, and that mistreatment is then normalized in our institutions, that leads us to internalization. So just taking in all of that information and just feeling like, oh, well, if this is what people are saying to me or doing to me, then it must be true, right? And so it's, yeah, on the slide it says applicable to both the targeted and the agent group. So the agent group is just non-LGBTQ plus youth and those who oppress that group. And so they start to think like, oh, well, if it's normalized and people just normally think this or must treat this group like this, and it must be true or right. And then on the other side, the targeted group, so LGBTQ plus youth, they start to believe those things. And so what do you think that internalization looks like? How do you think that LGBTQ plus youth are feeling, or how do you think that affects them and like internally? Lori says alone, absolutely. Shame, for sure. Depressed, scared, hopeless, yeah, for sure. Yeah, those are all really great ones. Lori says, honestly, I cannot imagine how isolating and devalued it must make one feel. Yeah, for sure. What they're feeling is wrong. Absolutely. And so we can see then if they're feeling like hopeless and scared and depressed, and maybe they are confused, then that kind of feeds back in, right, to that misinformation. So if this group is starting to believe like, oh, maybe I am wrong, then that leads to that misinformation that we talked about before. That's like, oh, they're just confused, right? And we see how this cycle just continues and goes on and perpetuates itself, which is scary. But we are going to talk about some skills that we can break that cycle. But I'd also just like you all to think about the intersectionality of this whole thing and this whole cycle of how someone who identifies as LGBTQ plus, like maybe that's not their only lens, right? That's not their only identity that they hold. And so I think we have some time to go back into breakout rooms, and I would love for you all just to discuss what that would look like. Maybe you can talk about what it would look like for someone who's LGBTQ plus, a young person. Maybe they're BIPOC, maybe they have a disability, maybe they're living with less than enough resources, and kind of just think about that cycle again with that intersectionality in mind. Does that all make sense to everybody? I'm hearing no, so I think that's a good sign. Awesome. Well,
Sarah, I'm gonna put I guess if you go in the breakout rooms, I'm gonna also put the cycle of oppression worksheet in the chat for you all, so you have that with you.
Awesome, thank you, Lonnie.
And I am not sure if we have Danny with us at the moment.
I think you're correct.
I'm
right here.
are. Oh, are you there, Danny?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, are you able to set up some breakout rooms for us?
I can, yeah.
Okay, terrific. Thank you.
Sierra,
All right.
can you repeat the activity for this one, please?
Yeah, so we are going to go into breakout rooms, and we are just going to discuss the cycle of oppression to kind of that intersectionality. So thinking about LGBTQ plus youth, but also some other identities that they might have. So if they're BIPOC as well, or they're living with a disability, or they have less than enough resources. So kind of just going through that cycle of like, what is the misinformation about LGBTQ plus, and if they're like a Black person, and thinking about that, what that misinformation looks like, and then how they might be mistreated because of it, and then what that institutionalization looks like and internalization. And I think Lonnie also put a little document in the chat that should give some, yeah, so it has the cycle on it if you need to refer to that. Did that help?
Okay. For breakout rooms?
Yes, thank you. If it just hasn't closed yet officially. All right, I think we're all back. Yeah, I hope you all were able to just really think on the experiences of maybe some of the youth that you work with are going through, or that you know, and just those intersections and all of those identities can be a lot of pressure and a lot of things to think about, a lot of different forms of mistreatment, a lot of, wondering, was I mistreated because of this or that? I'm not sure. So I hope you all were able to discuss that and think that over. We're just going to next go into some, I told you all that there are some skills to help you all break that cycle. And so I'm just going to quick go over them. We like to call those our positive communication skills. And so that first one is just transforming institutions. And so that just requires, just really implementing sound policies and procedures into your organizations and really thinking about the different policies that you have and how it affects everyone you work with or may serve. Building and strengthening relationships across group lines. So just really developing authentic, meaningful relationships, making sure not to tokenize anybody, and just, learning, we learn best from those we care about. And so really trying to learn from those people, but also, learning for ourselves. That next one is just cultivating resiliency. And so having pride in your own identities is really necessary to fighting all different forms of oppression. We can't empower other people if we don't feel empowered ourselves. And then the last one is just our positive communication skills to interrupt mistreatment. And so we have two skills, being stopping the behavior and shifting attitudes. And those two are kind of similar, but you use in different scenarios or situations. And so stopping the behavior can look like somebody says something derogatory and you say, hey, I really don't like that word. Could you not use that around me? Thanks. And so it's a quick little fix maybe that you just want to do in the moment. And then shifting attitudes is really a little bit more of a lengthy process, a little bit more ongoing. It could be maybe a family member or like a friend of yours who just always says something or does something that you're like, oh, I really don't like that. And so it's taking the time to be like, hey, you said this, which is really interesting. And I'd love to like understand why you said that or what makes you think that. And it's, like I said, a lengthier conversation to have, and one just really trying to shift their attitude or their behavior. And it's not a quick fix, but none of this is. It takes time, but it's all important. So now that we've gone through the cycle, kind of had some frame of reference, understanding where we come from and how we think and participate in the world, we are going to do an activity called Allyship in Action. And I'll let Harper go into that.
Awesome. Thank you. So just like the cycle of oppression, we're going to be going through a couple definitions. That way we can all be on the same page about what it is and how it impacts our work. So what is allyship? Allyship is when an individual speaks out and advocates for a person or group that is often targeted and discriminated against. Allyship works to interrupt and end oppression by supporting and advocating for people who are stigmatized, discriminated against, and treated unfairly, either proactively, reactively, or both. So the next part of this is like, what does this look like? So for LGBTQ and gender diverse communities, allyship in action is when someone supports and advocates for the rights of LGBTQ plus people. Allyship is important throughout the movement, throughout the movement for folks to utilize their privilege to demand the safety of those that are experiencing oppression. Anyone can work in allyship by working towards improving the climate of youth-centered organizations and advocating in conversations where someone might not feel safe to out themselves or be visible. Allyship can also exist within LGBTQ plus communities, and each person within the LGBTQ plus community not only holds those identities, but they also might be people of color, people with disabilities, immigrants, and people experiencing homelessness. So using your privilege as an ally of any group can help move conversations toward and create action around the different LGBTQ plus youth who are able to show up as their authentic selves. So why do we need allyship? I'm just going to kind of go through some statistics and we'll kind of dive deeper into this. So 58% of LGBTQ plus students felt unsafe at school because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. 35 to 40% of LGBTQ plus students commonly avoided school bathrooms, locker rooms, and gym classes because they felt unsafe or uncomfortable in those spaces. 24% of LGBTQ plus students were verbally harassed in the past school year because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. 96% of LGBTQ plus students heard homophobic remarks as in dyke or faggot. And in 2017, there were 52 hate violence related homicides of queer individuals, which is an 86% increase from the previous year. So these statistics paint a picture of LGBTQ plus and gender diverse experiences in schools. Youth who experience high levels of harassment and assault have poorer educational outcomes and lower psychological well-being. So based on the statistics that I just read, feel free to type into the chat box. Why do you think allyship is needed in your communities and schools?
I'll kick it off, Harper, with your reflection question. I think, we should all just want the best outcomes for youth and all youth. And if there's youth that are not coming to school for a certain reason, we should work on that to make sure that they are coming to school and feel welcomed and appreciated. So there's that. To help keep kids alive, Melissa said, absolutely. And Brady said it's easier to learn if you feel safe. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Well,
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing. So now we get to kind of talk about our action plan.
Oh, sorry, Harper. I have to speak to what these other people are writing in the chat. They're just coming through. I'm sorry, they all come out once.
That's beautiful.
Aaron said, because this is something that should horrify us all. Yes. Lori says, because when voices are not heard, we need to speak up for those voices. Anna said they might not have allies anywhere else. And then yours said, be that supporting voice. Yeah, I think something that when I was reading those came to mind for me is, that saying like, once you know better, do better. And so if we have these statistics in front of us and if we're, we know them, we should be doing something about them. So, and I feel like you all are very supportive and ready to take on that challenge. So yes, we're going to go into a little action plan just to help you all with some visioning. And this will be our last breakout room, I swear. I don't know if you all are tired of them, but if you are, this is the last one. Or if you really love them, I'm sorry that this is the last one. So what we're going to do for this one will be a little bit more interactive though, because I'm going to put in the chat a Jamboard, and so whatever room you're in, that's what group you are. And so we have these kind of questions on your group. You're going to have this like read through example interview, and based off of that you're going to put some action steps. So whatever was said in that interview, kind of think about some action steps that could be taken. So maybe in the interview, a young person may ask that their allies, take the time to educate themselves rather than relying on a person of that group to educate them. And so that action step could be educate myself about LGBTQ plus and gender diverse youth. And then the next slide, you'll see some like how you can put those action steps in place. And so it can be, there's sections actually, there's like youth and what like the youth can do to like make these action steps actually put into place, the faculty and staff, the community, different policies. And so if you haven't used Jamboard before, it's super simple. Like I said, whatever breakout room you're in, that's what group you'll be. And so you'll see like the first slide will say group 1, and you'll just click on the arrows at the top that say next frame and go to whichever group you are. And so it should say group 1, and then the next frame should say action steps, and you can click on those sticky notes that are there and type into them. And then the next frame should say action plan, so how you're implementing those steps, and they're also sticky notes. And then the next frame will be group 2. So each group has an interview section and then also some action steps and plans. So let me get this link for you.
Once you all log in, you should have an editing bar on the left side. If you don't have that editing bar, let Sierra know.
Thanks, Lonnie. Yes, you should all have the ability to edit it. Does that make sense to everybody? Awesome. Great. Well, we can go ahead and join our rooms as long as you have that Jamboard link.
Sierra, do you want this to be for 15 minutes?
Sierra is gone and my room was 1 and I didn't go to. So should I just go ahead and join here?
Oh, yes.
sorry, I forgot the time again. 15 minutes.
All right, it has been 15 minutes.
Always forget I'm muted. I think people are heading back in. Welcome back, everybody. Yeah, we're just going to take some time to just kind of, if a group wants to go and just share what they thought, or kind of some action steps or some action plans that they'd like to share, that'd be great. Is any group just feeling so excited to go? I feel, I'm not going to put anybody on blast or anything, but I felt like Harper's group was really having some good thoughts, good ideas.
We definitely did. Does anybody in my group want to kind of share what we talked about? If not, I can do it. That's fine. Okay. Well, so we were about how does, like, we're group 3. Sorry, Sierra, I'm trying to pull up.
No worries.
So ours was about building allies, coming to a, oh, what just happened? Now it kicked me out of my own screen. Oh.
Oh, because Lonnie's sharing her screen. Yay. Thanks, Lonnie.
But yes, here are action steps. These are things that we can do to make others feel valued and welcome. We can actually listen to the person. And, you know, there's just thing like, you know, listening wholly, you want to, you know, make sure that you're not just taking what you think the conversation's about. Like, you have to be able to have a conversation with, oh, I lost my train of thought. That's fantastic. Actually listening is extremely important. Asking for folks to educate themselves before coming up to LGBT young people and not really getting consent. So always asking consent if you are going to ask questions, but it's always better to, you know, throw it into Google first. It answers a lot. You know, there's a lot of misinformation out there, but that's a better first step than kind of putting someone in a position where they have to navigate that. So yeah, these are our actions.
Awesome. Let's hear about that plan, Harper.
Our plan is to help provide resources for the young people and to listen. That obviously was in our last one too, but it's extremely important to take off the adult hat, the boss hat, the power hat, whatever hat it is that you're wearing. You need to be able to take that off and actually listen without that kind of power that is with that. You can shift attitudes by stopping the behavior, asking for correction. If you're hearing and witnessing mistreatment, you can consult HR or other authority about what's going on. And then our policies, communicating with elected officials. So like in schools with bathroom legislation or sport legislation, it's really important to take it up with the school, absolutely. But at a statewide level, it's really important that we communicate with our elected officials to let them know how that impacts the situation. And then donate, and that could be time, money, effort, anything, to any supportive organization or people at large that you know, really want to do better and just be that resource. Community-wide, support organizations that support LGBTQ plus youth. Number one, Empower Montana, bam, that's us. And then if you identify as LGBT, live authentically, because the message that it sends to other folks can be positive, especially if there is mistreatment and fear and all of the icky feelings that come along with being mistreated.
Awesome. Thanks, Harper. Your group got a lot down. Very impressive. Would any other group like to share anything that they thought of, or doesn't even have to be necessarily about like the action plans or steps or anything, just things that they thought of during this activity?
Well, I can try to go and share what me and Lori got for our
Were you
action.
group one?
Yes, we were in group
Okay.
one. I mean, it took us a while to figure out as we were reading through it, and I think one of the struggles was really like start talking about like actual actionable steps, because it was a lot to kind of go off of and like think of them. So some of the things that me and Lori kind of wrote was like talk about maybe have created like a support group for youth across the board for them to share their experiences or learn from others or from each other, because I think one of the scenario was like they want their allies to hear them, they want their allies to educate themselves, but not only that, be I can't even think of the word, but that, like just like understand them. And then so we kind of said the other action steps is to have adult support systems to help youth kind of navigate all of the many resources that's available to them, and also have youth kind of like state their needs and really like state their needs, and also maybe even come up with a workshop, because what if like some allies they're like starting to support them but they just don't know where to begin or don't know what is it that they need. They can't just start somewhere like, oh, I hear you, without knowing exactly what the youth really needs to begin with. So those were some of the steps that we thought of. And as we were going through the action plan, it was a little bit more difficult when we were going through the action plan, because it was a lot hard to think about, because you have to like involve the youth, staff, policies, and communities. So it's like, oh, like you got to look at that big picture in a sense. So so for our action plan, when we talked about community, we mentioned, Lori mentioned, like just to reach out to groups that's already out there, that's already like coming together, and maybe have them come and present or bring out their information they know to these allies, so that they can learn a little bit more. Staff, just find open-minded people, adults that really understands and is not really judgmental, and kind of listen to the youth, but not only just any kind of adults, adults that are willing to build relationships with youth, not like a one time and that's it, like, oh, I'll never see you again. More like building and making that connection, and have them feel comfortable. And I think one thing that we talked about policies is this is something that I mentioned, is like if there is like no youth commission board established, like kind of establish one where you can have youth come together and share about their issues and what's their concern, and look up some resolutions and bring that towards local policy leaders, like, hey, I have this many youth that came up to us and said, this is an issue, and here are some solutions to those issues. And we're bringing it to you guys to take a look at it, and you guys are like the next steps in these policies. So that's kind of what we kind of came up with. And I don't know if Lori wants to piggyback on anything.
I don't think I can add anything. I think the youth commission that you were mentioning is in your area is brilliant. That's just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That you said a lot of good nuggets, a lot of things I was like, oh yes, that's great. So thank you for sharing. Does our last group want to share it all? If not, that's okay too. Awesome. Well, I think you can go ahead and stop sharing, Lonnie. Thank you. Thank you all for participating in that activity. I think it's just really great to really try to envision some steps and some plans that we can take. And it's always important. And I think you all said some really great stuff. One thing that we always really like to hit on is that, you know, just affinity groups are really important too. You know, we talk a lot about how educators or staff or administration can really support youth, and that is absolutely true and correct. But we also know that just people coming together who are part of a certain identity or group, coming together in that peer-to-peer kind of relationship and support is also really important. And so, you know, some plans and steps too can just be like starting an affinity group or making sure your school has those support systems and trying to figure out, you know, how your school can do that and is really important as well. And yeah, just making sure that youth and young people in general have peers to go to, just not just adults, is super important. Something I'd like to just, yeah, put out there. Does anybody have any questions or anything that they'd like to discuss or highlights or anything at all before we close out our session? Yeah, thank you all for coming and for all your engagement. It's very much appreciated. It's definitely awkward when we just sit here and no one engages in anything. And so it was awesome that you all spoke up or used the chat. So thank you all for doing that. And thank you for coming to our session. Harper, do you have anything to add before we sign off?
No, thank you all so much. It was really amazing being here.
Yeah, also Lonnie put in the chat, we are the Montana State GSA Network coordinator. So if you are in Montana and need help with starting a GSA, you can reach out to us. Awesome, thank you all.